Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Just another moment or two, probably get started. Welcome in. Welcome in. What's going on, Ivan? Doing good, man. What a brutal day it is. Julian, what's going on, bro? Pretty brutal day it was. That was not what we anticipated at all. Avery, he held in there. I mean, he definitely held in there. He actually tried to guide you guys a little bit this morning, before the bell, for the marketing opening bell, and he tried to give you guys a little bit of, some guidance as to what to expect. So that was a good thing this morning that Avery did. Hopefully the loss wasn't too much if you took the Fortuna call on Friday. It wasn't what we expected. It was a perfect day. I mean, it was a pretty good day for the fact that, we do need this pullback in that sense. We do need to see the market, pull back. A lot of stocks need to come in. A lot of dip buy opportunities are going to present itself. Some actually did present itself for a nice little bounce that's setting up, but the sense that we were due for this. We were due for this. Did we get blindsided a bit from it happening so quickly after what Super Fortuna alerted on Friday? Yeah, we got a little blindsided on that. And quad witching didn't do so well. That was a little bit of a false indicator as far as, that little push we had late in the day on Friday. That was a little bit of a false hope there, false indicator if you want to say for the better word, but it was not exactly what we anticipated on the follow through of quad witching. Do I think tomorrow's going to be red? No, I expect some sort of bounce. Will it be a strong bounce? Not exactly. I'm expecting. We have to fill the gap above now. Not necessarily. I don't I, I wouldn't say that we have to, because we don't necessarily have to, because we can start making lower highs, lower lows, in which we don't necessarily fill that gap. But let me try and get into some things, and then we'll go from there. If you guys actually have any specific tickers, drop it in the comments. If I do see it's probably repeated or so, we'll see if we get to it. But this is pretty much what I'm looking at as far as futures right now. We're actually pushing pretty nicely on the S&P, up about 12 points and a quarter there. So we did drop nicely, broke quite a few supports that I had plotted. So I did alter my charts just slightly. At this point, such a steep drop out of this channel, I am expecting some type of retest on the channel itself. So that's why you see I do have one arrow going up in which this would actually test near 446. That's 4464 more or less, close enough to that ballpark. That's where we would retest the channel on futures there. Now, the bad part is that if we do forever, for whatever reason, see that continuation off of that Evergrande China risk that pretty much slaughtered us today, then the downside is going to be a little bit more greater in terms of we could go down close enough to 425 sooner rather than later. Not necessarily, within the next 48 hours per se, but that downtrend is going to continue to make its way as we see lower highs, lower lows. As you see, kind of like this scenario, you see those lower bands there as we make lower lows, and you get those when you get those bounces, they're lower highs. So that's this type of scenario that could play out for us if we do see that this Evergrande situation, and then with FOMC here, if that fear sticks around, it's not going to be pretty. But I am anticipating the bounce from this standpoint. That drop happened very steep today. It the fact that it actually held for most of the day actually tells me that we are going to bounce because of the fact that we didn't get the bounce really intraday per se. That bounce that we did have early in the opening bell, more or less, was pretty weak, but we held down a lot for most of the day. So that's one thing that, looking at the momentum there was none at all. As far as some kind of bounce, there was no follow through on that bounce. It just held down all day. Now, NASDAQ is a little bit of a different picture, and it may paint a better picture as far as what's to come. So, if I switch over to the NASDAQ, I'm anticipating a head and shoulders here. We have that expanding triangle going. We have that little bit of a left shoulder. We have a head forming. We dropped right to support of that wedge. And now what I am anticipating that follows through with the bounce on futures for S&P would follow through for Nasdaq, in which we get that bounce, probably get some kind of a little bit drop off here once we hit that FOMC news within the next day or two, and then we'll just kind of lean down on that right shoulder and break support on that wedge. So I think this is going to be a short-lived bounce is what I'm anticipating. Going into the next 2 3 days just depends, how far that bounce may extend. Could it go above this level of about 15,263? It could extend it that right shoulder a little bit more higher. Depends how much follow through we get on that bounce. But I am expecting it to reverse, and I don't think the week is necessarily going to end on a high note from my estimation if this head and shoulders does play out. Now, if the pattern breaks, then that evergreen is just going to be something in the past and we're going to overlook it, and hopefully we get close enough over to that 448 level on SPY, which would be beautiful to send us right back into bull territory. Okay, those are the two scenarios that I'm looking at. As far as the market itself, again, I'm expecting the short-lived bounce and then some more downside. That's my estimation. Chop, I mean, we're going to see once the statements come out, because, again, they're in meetings. Once the statement comes out, then we'll see what the market reaction is. Could it be maybe a little bit of a red candle? Likely. It all depends on what fear that brings, what their statement is as far as the rates, the inflation, what their comments are going to be on that will tell a very big story for pretty much the rest of the year. And the rates are going to tell a bigger story as far as how soon we're going to see those rate increases. And that will determine a little bit more of the fear factor. Okay. So those are the two scenarios as far as futures for NASDAQ and S&P. Now, a few different charts to probably go over. One is Tesla. Tesla was definitely an anticipated move to move higher off of Super Fortuna. I know that I was high on it. Avery was pretty high on it. We did expect that push today. Of course, granted, Evergrande, that didn't happen. So what ended up happening is that, and let me get down to a little bit of a lower time frame, give you a little bit of a better picture here, is that we pretty much ended forming a little bit of a head and shoulders. This was expected to push, but now that it dropped, that actually formed that right shoulder. So we had the left, a little bit of the head here. That head was a little bit steep on that sell-off, but it was still held it intact because of the bounce. And now that we've actually right at the neckline, more so or less, we're likely gonna get, well, the neckline's here. We dropped off completely on that gap, right? So we're likely gonna get a retest of that neckline that follows through with the bounce tomorrow that's anticipated. And then what I'm expecting is on the bigger channel that you see that double curve, that's when I'm expecting to, on that further downside, is to test the channel. So that's why I say I'm expecting a short-lived bounce. So as that bounce is with Nasdaq, with S&P, it's gonna push right up to the neckline of that head and shoulders, and then we're gonna see a sell-off on this and right into support. And we'll see at that point in time how much the fear factor is, how much selling pressure there is. That's going to either break this channel or we get that bounce that I pretty much anticipate at that point in time. Okay. And that bounce will probably be likely into next week. So this steep sell off will go right into the end of the week. That's my anticipation. We'll see what tomorrow brings. That's going to be more of a better factor. Again, that sell, whether we continue to sell off or we get that bounce by morning, as if we hold here, because Nasdaq is pushing right now, what that will paint a better picture for us. Okay. Another chart that I was looking at was Amazon. Let me pull this one out just a little bit. Pretty much on Amazon, I'm looking at a little bit of an expanding wedge. This is more descending. So we had a little bit of an ABCDE pattern here. ABCDE. That's kind of that drop off. You also have a little bit of a head and shoulders action here, which I didn't outline. That's the left shoulder, a head, and then that right shoulder, which pretty much dropped off on that gap down. So I do have my supports outlined. We do have the support right around 32.85, close enough, or 32.87. And then if that bounce does occur tomorrow, that follows up with Nasdaq and Tesla, then we could see this potentially bounce right up close enough to 3,400, right? So that would give you a nice little, roughly close enough to a $40 push on Amazon tomorrow if that bounce does occur. Because as we see, this was prior support before, a little bit of a prior resistance, close enough. We did have a little wick down on a little, and then a follow through to the push. So that was right around that level. And then the body of this candle rests right on that resistance. So that's what I'm expecting to push that resistance, and then we'll determine the follow through on that, whether we get a reversal or we get a follow through on the upside. Okay, that's another one that I have on my radar. This is actually one on my radar tomorrow. This is a double top formation off the day off. Well, I had it on the daily. It looks a little bit better probably on the daily, does it? A little bit. So this is a double top that we had. We had the double top back for 403. We finished that double top right on August 4th, so that was last month, beginning of last month. And so now that we've actually, it looks like we completed that double top bottom to bottom here. I'm expecting that nice bounce close enough to that 300 mark. This is one that's definitely on my radar for tomorrow. So I'm going to be watching this one. If I go down to, I want to say the 15-minute, we can paint a little bit of a better picture here. And if I actually show you, this looks a little bit like a falling wedge formation here. Let me actually change the color of that so I can differentiate. I'll do white. All right. And I think it's likely right around here. Was it that I had? Let's see. If we get a nice follow through here. I think it's right through that gap, right through there. Perfect. So that's right around the falling wedge that I'm looking at. We'll see if we get a nice little follow through, push over through this resistance. And I think we're looking close enough to 290. That's going to be one on my radar. Could potentially be on the watch list tomorrow morning. Depends if we see a nice little gap up by morning. So that's a little bit of a wait and see approach. We'll see how it does tomorrow morning. Maybe we get up once we get that push over that 284 close enough. Then that's definitely going to be something on the radar. If I do see it, then maybe Avery will probably be ahead of me. He'll probably call that out on live tomorrow because I won't be on live. But he'll probably spot that. That may be a nice play tomorrow. But that's another one on the radar for tomorrow. Let me see what else I had outlined. Nvidia was a strong drop today. That selling pressure was not pretty today at all on Nvidia. But what I did want to outline was the fact on the daily. As you see, this trend line actually acts like a over under. Once it held, it actually pushed. Once it went under, you were looking for it to come back up. So right now, as we just wick down just below that support, we're going to see if this actually holds tomorrow with the bounce that we anticipate. And I'm actually expecting this to get close enough to 214. And that's when we're going to see if this continues to get a follow through. So it's not necessarily on watch for me tomorrow. It's going to likely be a $3 move that you're looking at for the upside. And so I'm going to look to see if we get a follow through after the fact. And then that's when I want to see if it actually holds this trend line for the upside. That's going to be what I'll be watching. If it doesn't hold up here, then yeah, it's likely we're going to see some type of action down here where we get a nice little follow through on the drop off. And then at a later point in time, then we'll see the reversal take place. All right. So that one's on watch more so not for tomorrow, but for maybe on Wednesday. Disney was one that actually led the downfall along with Apple today. Coincidentally, the banana is actually still intact. And I don't know if Tamakaze actually knows about this one, if it's still intact, if he actually looked at it, but the banana's still intact. What I do like about this is that the banana actually looks like it's at support. So I contemplated taking calls on this one today. I literally contemplated it, but I kind of want to get a little bit of a wait and see approach. Would I or rather get in above the gap fill? Yeah, I would rather because then it would actually take me right up to resistance. I would feel a little more confidence there. But I'm gonna take it as a wait and see approach. But I just thought I mentioned that the banana is still intact. It looks like it's holding a little bit of a support level here. That's giving that round bottom still intact. So we'll see that one as well, how that follow through. I did also look at banks. I wanted to see how banks actually performed as well. JPM just had a nasty downfall, nasty gap fall. So pretty much this one I expect a short-lived bounce as well. This head and shoulders may very well play out. You have that little round left, a steep head, and then this right shoulder is actually a little bit extended. So you're likely gonna get a nice little push. I did have this resistance right up to 155. I anticipate that pushing up to at 155 right into the middle of that gap fill, but I don't anticipate it actually completing the gap fill. I'm expecting it to make another leg lower, and once we get below that neckline, I think that's gonna flush. So that's a bear play that I'm more so interested in, and that's gonna be one that I keep on my radar once we see that either the market continues to sell off because we could sell off and go right down to the neckline, or I'm gonna wait to see the bounce, and then I may short it very well at 155 and take that right down to the neckline. So I'll keep an update on that one in chat. I'll try to alert that one. If I do see that bounce to 155, I may very well take that put on JPM so that I can ride this down. Maybe FOMC statement actually helps the downfall for banks, hopefully. So that could be another scenario that's a little more risky as far as being a news over TA. Just like we saw news over TA for Super Fortuna because Evergrande was I don't think if the Evergrande news came out, then we would have saw what we saw today in the market. That's a high possibility that Super Fortuna would have played out had we not had the Evergrande news. But again, this will be possibly news related if depending on the FOMC statement. But I'm looking at this pattern and we'll see how it plays out. I'll keep an alert if I do enter a position there. Okay. Let me see. Also, Apple. This is another one that led the downfall with Disney today. We also saw leaps triggered on Apple today. There wasn't much flow. It looks like no, there was a little bit of a conflict with the flow today. So that's being addressed with internally with coders and so forth. And we'll get that back up and running by tomorrow. So, but this is one that was a little bit interesting. When I saw that Apple Leap call come out, I was like, Apple Leaps at this point in time, market just dropped no, over 100 points on Nasdaq, and I'm like, but why? So I ended up plotting it out on the daily. Looks like it triggered because possibly this trend line may hold. So I will look to see how this trend line holds. Now, I don't necessarily think that it's going to hold. So that's why you actually see that I have a nice little support line here because this actually acted as pretty much an ascending triangle when we did break out. So I'm going to see how it actually acts if we do end up getting close enough to that 138. That'll be the point where I actually nibble on getting into calls because that may be a strong support level. But I didn't feel so comfortable getting in just at this point unless you were pretty much just scalping or a quick overnight hold. I don't particularly, I wasn't fond of the spot. Granted, certainly going into tomorrow. So I didn't want to take that, but I definitely like the fact that this support level will be key right around that 137 level, close enough to 138. That I can actually give you a better idea. Yeah, it's 137. So that 137 level is what I'm going to be looking to see if that holds. And I will nibble at that to scale into a few calls and see if that actually holds. And of course, pretty much market volatility and market conditions will determine whether I actually do it at that point in time. But again, if I do it, I'll alert everyone in the chat. Let me see what other ones if I had anything else outlined that I wanted to mention. Uh, I do have the 10-year bond yield. I was actually looking at that. I wanted to see if we got any kind of drastic move. We actually have an inverted cup and handle. You could say this looks a little bit like a rising wedge here. This is something that I'll keep an eye on, especially after that FOMC statement comes out, likely on Wednesday. This is going to be something that you do want to keep an eye on because I am expecting somewhat of a big directional move, whether it increases to make the handle, more steep going up before the drop, or if we end up just breaking that support level. And then I do have a little bit of supports here down to the 115 level and down to the 107 level. I think once we do get down to that 115 level, that's going to bring a little bit of a panic. So that's something to also keep in mind as well, because that will definitely raise a red flag, and that's not going to be good for the overall markets. All right. So that was the last one that I actually had that I wanted to outline. Just a few charts because I know that we didn't have much of the flow go off today, the algos. Myrna, I didn't look at Myrna at all today. That was really interesting. Let me actually delete all my charts because I like to actually look at it from a clean perspective. Let's see if I go down to the 1 hour, 2 hour, which I do actually see a little bit of a head and shoulder action here. You had a little bit of a head and shoulder action right there. It looks like a little bit of the neckline. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder. You broke down. It looks like it's actually pushed right back up the neckline, which I'm not too certain I like that perspective there. Now, let me actually see if you have any type of support levels that are really interesting here. Let's see. So I do see why it may have bounced there. Let's see. Yeah, so you actually hit a support level, and I think I can take out this right here. So as you see, you hit the body of this candle, you hit that middle wick, and you hit that middle wick right there. So I see why it ended up bouncing there. And then now you also have likely a resistance here that looks like it lines up almost beautifully. Wow. So that may end up turning into a nice little falling wedge. So if that ends up breaking that resistance, Moderna is going to get really interesting. Right over that level of 430, this may fly. And if that flies, see our first level of resistance that we're looking at. I'm looking right around this level. Right around 441. And that could reach there pretty darn fast. So this will be that move that I would anticipate looking at. Could that happen very well tomorrow? That is definitely a high possibility that I would not doubt. So that's one that I will actually keep on my radar for tomorrow. Let me actually put a green dot on that. I'll keep a lookout on that one tomorrow. So that was a nice one there. So I'll keep an eye on that one. Twitter, I haven't looked at Twitter for quite a while. Ugh. Let's see if I get a daily picture. That'll actually paint a better picture. I had a nice little support level outline, it looked like, which may very well actually still be in play on this. Is there any type of pattern looking like? Nothing particularly, but this looks like a bear flag right here. That is particularly a bear flag, and I'm not fond of that. So you have a little bit of a bear flag formation going on here, in which that is not pretty, and it's likely going right down to that support line that I actually have outlined, which is right around that 57 level. So you do look like you have a little bit more downside on Twitter. I wouldn't want to be in this space right now. That one does not look particularly pretty. All right. So if you're in a calls on that one, I would try to scale out of that. Hopefully you get some kind of a little bit of a gap up tomorrow morning if we do see a bounce. And then I would exit that if you're in calls because it's not quite ready yet. All right. I saw Adder today. I know that Tamakaze was all over that one today. Let's see what my chart looked like right now. I know that I had that falling wedge. My key level on this one was that 20 mark. So it didn't quite get there. I do like a little bit of that reversal. Let's see if I can get zoom in here. See if I see anything that looks interesting. So it's not a cup yet. I don't really see a cup formation just yet. It's in the process of still curling. What I do particularly like is the fact that you have a nice little falling wedge here, which will likely help see a continuation tomorrow. That will literally help with that continuation. So that's why you saw that little candle pop right there. So I would look for a continuation. Now, let's see if there's a level that particularly interests me of getting over. Yeah, you would likely need to get right over back this level if I outline it. So you need to get right back over that 13, I would say round number 1350 will be that level that you need to get back over. Once you get back over that 1350, then adder would start to get interesting. And then you also keep in mind you have this gap fill right here as well. Let me outline it so you see just around what mark that is. Have a nice little gap fill right here. So that's definitely going to be in play once you cross that 1450 mark, ballpark. And that gap fill is in play at that point in time. So that'll push right into close enough to 17 mark. So that's how I would look at that. Once it gets over the 1350, then I would enter calls. I would actually caution entering so early per se, unless you're looking to scale in. You have a small position, maybe scale in here. Once it gets over 1350, then I would look to add to my position because then I know that it actually broke right above that high and it's still curling to form that cup because that's what I would really look for. If it forms that cup, oh, that's going to be beautiful. That would be a beautiful cup if it actually formed that. That's what I would literally be watching. And I could probably spread this out. That's when this would actually get really interesting. I didn't get in today. I was a little bit sidelined on this one. When I saw Tamakaze actually calling it out, I was in the middle of doing something, so I didn't necessarily get in there. But I did like the move that he saw, and it was a beautiful play today. So hopefully you guys got in with the whole team. But this potential cup right here is a very interesting format right here, and that gap fill. Once that gets over that gap fill, I do expect this to explode. That'll be the point where I expect this to go pretty much bonkers at that point in time. So this squeeze is very well in play, and we'll see that once that gets over that 1450 level. And I'm sure Tamakaze will be all over this, calling it out on live. So if you're not listening to him on live, you definitely need to be there. All right. Other than that, I think that kind of wraps up the session tonight, guys. Um, you know, probably about 30 minutes here on the session. So we'll see what tomorrow brings. Hopefully, we get a nice little bounce. Hopefully, no one's actually held through the entire drop on calls from last week because that would be really brutal. Hopefully, you cut your loss at open today. And if you're swinging puts, it's a risky night to be swinging. But the bounce is anticipated, so I can understand why you took the risk. But other than that, I think that we'll call it a night. Hopefully, the Green Bay Packers win tonight because I know that they're playing right now, and I'm actually trying to watch the game as well. So, other than that, we'll call it a night. Join the team on live tomorrow, and I'll be in chat. Hopefully, some nice plays come along. I'm definitely watching Moderna. That's definitely on my watch list. And Zoom is also going to be likely on my watch list tomorrow. So, those are the two plays that literally stood out to me today. But you guys have a good night then, all right? I think we'll call it a night. And see you guys same time, same place tomorrow, all right? Have a good one, guys.